I want us to dive in and get going. Hi, everybody. This is Michael. I so appreciate everything. It's amazing. Okay. Yeah, see if you can share, Kylie and Fliss, see if you can share.
Yep. And then, yep.
Nice. Okay, everybody, I'm going to take 1 second here and you guys can just take off there. Welcome to the Power of Stories. I am here because I met these amazing 2 librarians in the summer of 2019. We did a session called The Power of Stories at Next Library 2019 in Aarhus, Denmark. And we had not met each other until we came together to do the conference. And it was absolutely amazing. And I what I did back then was I laid the kind of the groundwork of what stories mean and how we can share stories. And it's some of the stuff that you all saw in the opening session today. If you want to go to the next slide, that's totally cool. So we said the dialogue stories can create benefit all who participate. What you are going to hear today from Kylie and Felicity from, gosh, it's Yarra Libraries, I'm sorry, right? So it just boom, right out of my head, sorry about that, is their portion of the amazing Power of Stories session that we did. So I just wanted to be here. I wanted to thank them for getting up so early in Australia to join us. And I'm going to turn it over to you all so you have as much time as possible. Thank you, Kylie. Thank you, Felicity, for being here with us.
No worries. Do you want the video fast though? Hi, everyone. Can you hear us? Okay, so we're going to talk to you a little bit around the power of stories and programming that you can develop because of people's stories. So we're going to focus on some of the inclusive practices that we've done at Yarra Libraries, and it really comes out of you know, stories we have from our community, but also our personal stories as well. So I guess to start, in libraries, obviously we're surrounded by many stories, and stories are really powerful, they're really impactful, and behind a lot of initiatives across our libraries, across the world, there's lots of stories to tell and lots of reasons. So Michael's spoken about getting to the heart of stories, and that's a big part of his book as well. I hope you've all read it. And building the narrative and developing empathy with the storyteller as well. So I'm just going to share briefly some examples of how we've put that into practice in our library service. And we've also written a paper. We've got lots of links at the end of this presentation. So anything that you feel you've missed or you want to go back and look at, you can. So we've got lots of that at the end of the PowerPoints as well. So I suppose I'm going to start with my story. So that's where we'll start. This is my why. So these are my 2 boys. This is Jonah and Jacob. And both of them have disabilities. So Jonah is 9 and Jacob is 16. They both have autism or Asperger's and ADHD, so the comorbid disability of ADHD. So I guess personally, when you have children diagnosed with disabilities, your whole world turns upside down. Your diagnosis period is really brutal and you do feel really completely lost. As a parent, you grieve for all the things you imagined would be in your child's future. And you obviously catastrophize as a parent, you get angry, you withdraw, you feel isolated and very alone. So you're sitting in this cycle of grief and it's a real emotional hamster wheel. So I guess why I got into libraries, I used to have businesses, and when my kids were diagnosed, I really needed to change my life. And so that's how I came into libraries. And I'll talk a little bit more later about how that's developed into programming. But I guess, how do you explain to people about disabilities they can't see? Because my boys really just look like any other children. And I guess when you hear the word autism or ADHD, you often form a mental image of what it looks like. But autism doesn't necessarily look like what you think Rain Man or like what you see in films and things like that. This is actually how autism looks for me, and it's different for everybody. And these two boys are their own individuals, just like you and I, and all of us are our own individuals as well. So it doesn't have a physical marker. When you go through having children with disabilities, often you lose friends and family because people don't understand what's going on in your world and in their world. My journey's not any really different to a lot of other parents that have got children on the spectrum. But, you know, this is my story. And so if I can take you all into a sort of a visualization. So children on the spectrum are very visual. So when I asked my eldest son, Jake, to describe what his disability was like, he described it as being on a roller coaster. So if I could quickly take you there, if you close your eyes and you imagine that you're sitting on that roller coaster and you've got that anticipation of the bar coming down, you're nervous, and depending on who you are as an individual, you'll either be really excited or you're really nervous about that ride. I can tell you now, I don't like being on roller coasters, and I've been forced to go on several of them, and it's been quite an experience of anxiety for me. So my son's describing this roller coaster. So if you can think about sitting on this roller coaster and you're climbing up, that clicking and that slow climb to get to the top of the roller coaster, what's that feeling in your stomach? How are you feeling? And then you get to the top and you look around and you know that the roller coaster is going to go down. And you can't control often how you react to that ride. So you might, well, some people vomit, you might scream, you might laugh, just depending on where you're at. And then you're waiting for that reprieve where you get to catch your breath, and then you've got the climb, and then you're coming down again. So that's how my son has described his disability and also his experience of the world. And when he described that in great detail to me, it really gave me an insight as to how he experiences everything. Going to football games, too overwhelming. Going to basketball games, because he's on that roller coaster. And as a parent, I'm strapped in next to him as well. So that just gives you, that's a little bit of my story. So why is this story relevant to libraries? The stats for here in Australia is 1 in 88 children across the world are diagnosed with autism each year. And these families are coming into our libraries. So this is a real shared narrative. Children on the spectrum learn differently. They're often visual or oral learners, and their neural pathways work differently. So as my little one, Jonah, describes it, he says, my brain is wired differently. So the way autism impacts an individual means they often need more time to process information that's in front of them, and they often find social situations or physical environments challenging, which results in them feeling overwhelmed. Now, here's a picture of a typical story time. So if you can imagine, I mean, that's the sort of crowds that we get at our story times, especially in outer suburbs. We have high populations. So some of you can really relate to this, I'm sure. So looking at this, and this is how this sort of programs have developed. I mean, I've got my story with my children and their experience, and there's a lot of families coming into our libraries. They're coming into our story times wanting to connect, wanting to be in our spaces, and this is what they're presented with in a story time. So these sorts of stories, and then connecting with people that are coming to these programs, we've had story times, and you can see children very overwhelmed in this sort of environment. And this is how we shape programs and services. And how do we look at these programs through a different lens? So how do you put yourself in somebody else's shoes and really see it from their point of view? So if a child's on the spectrum, this would be really, really overwhelming. So this is why we're talking about story times and new initiatives at the moment. So design thinking for creative practices. So this is sort of the process that we go through when we're looking at programming. We empathise, we listen to our customers' stories, we learn about our community, we define what that is, and then we ideate, we create programs based on those stories from our community. Then we create something, we prototype, we build those ideas, and then we create programs, and then we test it and refine and evaluate. So, you know, think about it. Think about how you would tell a story with no words, you know, and normally if we were doing this in an interactive session with you, we would take you through an exercise of saying, hi, Fliss, what did you do on the weekend? And then we would take away your use of words and see how you would actually tell us what you did on the weekend without using words. Like, think about that. That's quite an interesting concept. So things that can help in a library environment are things like a library communication board. So usually using visuals. So have a think about the libraries that you're in. Do you have these sorts of assistants for people that are maybe, and this is not just for autism, people that have got acquired brain injuries, MS, you know, don't have speech, are more visual because of their disabilities. These are the sort of things that you can put in your libraries to create that communication being a lot easier. So everyday programming, what can we do? This is like typically how we would set up an inclusive story time, and we'll go on to that. You can use visual timers, that can help everybody. We can use sensory aids. So part of our initiatives, and more details are in the paper links at the end of this presentation. I'm not going to go into, due to time, I'm not going to go into mega detail. But what we've done is we've brought in inclusive story times. So we've introduced these aids, visual aids, schedule boards, tents, earmuffs, weighted blankets for children coming to our normal story times. So they've got aids to help them participate with everybody else, just like everybody else in our story times. Hex cards, these are picture exchange communication aids. These are aids that you can have as part of the schedule board. So what we do, you can have a look at this schedule board. Every story time we do, not just our sensitive story times, but our normal story times, we've now incorporated a schedule board for everybody. So it's really inclusive. And again, it's not about just kids with disabilities or presenting with learning difficulties. This really helps with people in our community that English is a second language and all the rest of it. So it's using visuals, reinforcing what we're doing and how the sessions are going to run. And our librarians, our children's librarians love this because it actually helps them keep on track as well, and everybody knows what to anticipate. We also have created borrowable sensory learning kits as well. So this is to assist learning through activity and play. So a lot of our families can take away these kits. They come in little tubs, which is a book and an activity and everything else. So it backs up that learning. And this is actually a lot of the children on the spectrum use a lot of these things to learn as well. What we've also created is we've created chill out spaces at our community festivals. So what we're doing is taking the library environment. As you all know, our library environments are very sensory controlled. They're often quieter, not necessarily with some of the activities that we're doing, but generally our environments are quite calm. And so what we've done as an added sort of thing to festivals around our area, we're metro, we're sort of inner city where our libraries are focused, so we're very much a part of the festival scene. And this is one of the things that we create. So when children that might be a bit overwhelmed at festivals, they have a chill out space and they relate that to the library as well. We really try and create that safe space for children to play away from the crowds. So, and I'm rushing through here because time's of the essence, but another program I wanted to talk to you about that we've done is Sensitive Santa. This is hilarious, this photo, not hilarious because I've been through it, but I mean hilarious in the sense that sometimes the Santa experience is not always fun, especially for children on the spectrum. So what we've done is we've created a program that is sensitive to the Santa experience, and this sits in the library. So you might know the Sensitive Santa program often happens at shopping centres, and often they do it before they open and close. What we've done is we've sort of taken that concept but had it live inside the library, because the feedback that we got from parents still being in a shopping centre with kids with the autism, even if it is before hours, it can still be attached to a lot of stress for the child. So we also won a documentary, an International Film of the Year, which we're going to play for you now, which shows you the library. Thanks for watching that. As I said, the links are at the end of the video, and I'm going to throw over to Fliss, but you know, every time I watch that video, I get very emotional. My son's in that as well, and it's a program that really is life-changing. And we're going to talk to you a little bit about Libraries Change Lives now.
Hi everybody. So Victoria, which is in the bottom of Australia, it's one of the 8 states in Australia, have come together, all public libraries, and we've got a campaign going called Libraries Change Lives. And this is about telling your story. So do you tell your story? Do you know your why? Do you tell your library story? And do you tell your community story? So the 47 library services we've got together and embarked on an advocacy campaign called Libraries Change Lives. We needed to tell our story. So how did we do this? We need to tell our community stories on how our libraries have changed their lives. It is about the impact that we have, getting down to the heart of the story. So why do we need to tell these stories? We needed to achieve three things, and we needed to know our audience is able to tell the right stories for the campaign. It's all about our politicians. So we're advocating and for more funding. We wanted to boost our operational funding, invest in library infrastructure, and deliver early years education to create literate and educated communities. So this is just the basics of what we need. In Victoria, every dollar that is spent on public libraries, we achieve $4.30 return on investment for our communities. And we need to tell our stories to our governments to say, you know, this is what we're achieving and this is why. We needed to tell them our why and what we're doing for our communities. So as Kylie said, to tell our stories, we needed to have emotion, meaning, and coming straight from the heart. And to do that, this is about our audience. So we needed to know our audience. How do we tell our stories to reflect the needs of our community? And with the Stories Libraries Change Lives campaign, our audience was for our politicians. We need to demonstrate to our funders that libraries change lives every single day and multiple times a day. We all see it. When anybody comes in our library, that is what we're seeing. And that is why we needed to do what we needed to do. So we love this quote because we are all storytellers. We all live in a network of stories. There isn't a stronger connection between people than storytelling. And that's exactly what public libraries and all our libraries achieve to do. So the storytelling components for impact is really the content. You know, if you don't, we need to find the content. So by doing that, we need to actually talk to our community. And there's many different communication methods that we can use, but the main thing for us is emotion. You know, you've got to tap into the heart of what the story's about and the emotion about what our libraries are doing for our community. And then the last is really the impact that this story can have and how we're going to share that impact with all our community to explain, you know, what public libraries are about and what all our libraries are about. What impact are we having on our community? So here's just a couple of examples of how we have shared our story with our communities through our social media. So I'll just talk to you about Janet's story. So we have community lunches every Saturday in a partnership with Open Table. And we're creating a space where our community can come in. They learn about the sustainability of the food that they have in their homes and how they can repurpose a lot of their fresh ingredients. But part of it also is for the community to come in and have a lunch and actually chat to people in their community and get to know, you know, if you're feeling isolated and lonely, then you can come here and make a friend. So just by sitting down and asking the right questions, we got a great conversation started with Janet. So Janet lost her husband 6 months ago. The one thing they both did together was cook. They had a love of cooking together. And now when she cooks, it reminds her of her husband and it makes her feel really lonely and sad. So just by having this conversation with Janet, we got to the story of why she was here. But she said to us, you know, by coming to this event today, she felt the connection with food again. And today, you know, she didn't feel lonely. And that is the heart of the story for Janet. And that's the heart of what we do in libraries and how we connect to our community. So by telling Janet's story and getting the heart and getting to know who she is as a person, you know, we share that with our other community to say, look, you know, look what we can do and look what libraries provide. This is Tegan. So Tegan's a staff member. Before coming to work at our library, she experienced hardship in her early 20s. She could not afford much at all. Just being able to spend time in the library kept her connected to her community in a way which was very important to her self-esteem in a time that was incredibly difficult time. Now being a staff member and able to create this same space for others is something she's really proud of. So by talking to Tegan and getting her story, see how there's different stories and libraries mean things to different people. So connecting with your community and getting to know their story, spending some time sitting with them, listening to them, and like Kylie said, creating programs that will connect them better to their community And this is what the Libraries Change Lives campaign has done. And if you go to the our websites at the end here, you'll be able to see what Libraries Change Lives and that can do as well. So it's about telling your story. It's about getting to know your community and celebrating the achievements that we have done for our community and their feelings and their emotions. So that's just a bit about the Libraries Change Lives campaign.
So we're going to share all these slides and stuff with you online as well, so you can go back to these links. We've done lots of videos, and that's part of this storytelling as well. We do storytelling in lots of forms. It can be face-to-face, through conferences. We're doing pictures on social media, videos, lots of different things. We've got podcasts and things like that, where we're really trying to share stories through lots of different mediums as well. So there's lots of ways you can connect with us, which we'll share as well. So we've also written an inclusive practices paper, which sort of really gives you more detail around some of these programs and the practices that we're doing, listening to our story, our community stories as well. So you can link through that, and that goes through our PLB page. And we've got some emails and things like that. We're on Twitter as well. So please keep in touch with us past this. There's lots of other great programs we're doing. We've just only had a short amount of time. So these were just a couple of the programs that we could share with you as well. So I think we're going to go into, we'll start our video and we're going to go into a question so you can sort of interact with us. We'll start our video of us so you can see us. Hi, everyone. And I think Margaret, our moderator, is going to sort of give us an opportunity to ask or interact with you on some Q&A. Over to you, Margaret. Thank you.
Yeah, so we just had a few questions come through. Everyone's been so thankful for the fantastic stories you've told and information you've shared about how you've integrated that so creatively into your library to be more inclusive and to have such a unique perspective in how to engage with patrons. And one question we had really was about the Santa. Sharuka, do apologize if I mispronounce your name, but she was wondering if that was free to attend or if that was, you know, a sponsored event or a donation event, just how that was able to be set up.
Absolutely. So I've set it up across a couple of library services, and I've actually trained about 4 or 5 different library services in Sensitive Santa. And depending on the library service and funding, one model that I did at my previous library service was I did it all via donation. So I got local community groups, you know, like a railway centre would give me $1,500, because really the only cost that's involved is paying for Santa. We obviously cover the cost, we train our staff, and so we cover the cost of the staffing. And we keep Santa well fed, well watered, because we run the sessions from 9 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock, and they're 20-minute sessions, and they're very individualised. And then we use volunteers, so we partner with volunteer photography societies, and the photographers actually take photos of the sessions. So the families come in, they have an individual interaction with Santa in a controlled environment. There is no music, there's no big sensory decorations. It's very, very controlled, very quiet room. And Santa, actually, we do lots of interactions and we do lots of interviews prior to the session. So Santa and all the volunteers in the room get a cheat sheet on basically every child's needs, so Santa can really talk to that family. And then the photographers take about 150 to 200 photos of the session, because often it takes about 20 minutes for the children to relax and get used to Santa in the session. And they're very candid photos, and then we give them, we transfer all those photos on the spot for them. We put them into a chill out room. And within 10 minutes, they take away about 200 photos of that session, and that's all free. We, like, from a library perspective, our customers get all of that for free, and we sort out the funding through partnerships and things like that as well. I hope that answered that.
She says, yes, thank you. That was very helpful, because I think sometimes when putting together programming, you have to get so creative with how you bring it all together.
Yep.
And do a lot of community outreach, so it can be a little intimidating to know how to even begin that. So hearing a success story like that, I think, is very inspiring for people to hear about the community coming together to do a programming with the library. So I think that's great. Other people shared they liked the take-home creative kits that you guys were discussing, even if they have some sensory play items at their library. That was then, you have to be at the library to be playing with it, not something you could bring home from the library like a book. So if you're trying to offer those alternative ways of learning or experiencing the world, if it's something you can only do when you're in the physical space, that's limiting the impact the library can have. So I think that's a really excellent point. That let's see who shared that. That was Jen Hirsch, said that they do have sensory story time at her library, but do not have the kits. And then Simon Rendy shared that he really loved the board and all the information you guys have been sharing. So I would just say, if anyone else has questions, just so people can, keep on time, and you guys are in Australia and on a totally different time zone. We appreciate hearing so much about what you're doing. But I would say, if anyone else has questions, either put them in the chat or go ahead to email me. I put my email in the chat. And I can forward that to the presenters to get in touch with you if you want some more time to digest all this quality information and explore all the links.
Right. I'm just reading the chat. No, nothing else.
Yeah, if anyone wants to pop in with any other questions, feel free to add them into the chat and I can share them. Or if you want to think about it, I can get back in touch with you later on. As this is such an interesting and excellent way to reach out to the community. That yeah, I put my email in there. I'll put it one more time.
Fantastic. And we've got that on the slides. And I think too, these sorts of programs that we do, we're really, and we're all doing it, we're really making a difference. And I think the key too is that we need to, because librarians and libraries do this around the world all the time. They do really creative programming and really connect with their community. I think what's been lacking is often sharing that and sharing the impact. So a big part of what we're doing is really trying to share the impact of what libraries are doing, because, we've seen it across the world where libraries are shutting down and people still might have traditional notions of what a library is. And so for us, a big part of what we're doing too is breaking that down and saying, well, we're not just about books, we're about these experiences. Doing a program like Sensitive Santa, it's not just about the Sensitive Santa program, because what we're also doing is we're developing a relationship with the library and we're developing a positive experience in our library environment where that family then go, okay, the library is actually a safe space for me. They're not going to judge me. They're inclusive. They understand where I'm coming from. So maybe I'll come back to a story time, or maybe I'll come back and read a book, or, so it's about that. It's about building that relationship as well. So, and these sorts of programs are vehicles for that.
And I think that's a great point too, if you're trying to propose programming at your library, having some success stories or just being able to point to examples internationally where, something new is tried and the impact is demonstrable. That really helps compel, why someone would want to get behind what you're doing. So I think the more you explore what people are doing internationally and share, the more powerful what you're doing becomes, because it's not even just about your community, it's a broader scope. So I can't thank you guys enough from my own perspective sharing these stories. And I think it's really interesting and exciting what you guys are doing. So feel free to go ahead and end it whenever you want, but I just can't thank you guys enough for taking the time to share all your hard work with us and excite people about what they might be able to do at their own libraries.
Yeah, I think the
Thank
main
you.
takeaway really is to get to know your community, find out who is in your community, and develop programs to support your community and tell your story. So that's not what we're not good at, telling our stories. We need to get good at that and finding out our community stories.
Right. Absolutely. I think we're good unless anyone else had wanted to pop in with a question. Otherwise, feel free to email me and follow up definitely with the recording when it's up for all of the slide presentations. Or if you're like me and an obsessive screenshotter, then you can go ahead and follow all the links right away so you don't forget. But the recordings will be up on Library 2.0, so you can always revisit in case you weren't able to go to all of those right now and find out more information.
Great.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it. I hope it was meaningful.
Yes, thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you. Bye.